There's been a lot of drama going on in the Yu-Gi-Oh community, specifically the past format community, and that is this whole debacle of time travel versus Time Wizard. So I'm going to get you all up to speed on what happened, and then I'm going to try to explain why this happened and where we are going in the future. And I am going to analyze this all through the lens of everyone knows Konami is a for-profit business. They are trying to maximize returns for shareholders. And, I'm someone who's been playing Yu-Gi-Oh for, pretty much the beginning. Someone who runs one of the most popular YouTube channels in the niche of Yu-Gi-Oh past formats, and also someone who, in the past, had the job of basically improving operations and efficiency for businesses, right? I'm someone who's studied investing. And to just get right into it, it's, if you ever hear Warren Buffett talk about what businesses he likes to invest in, he talks about that he likes simple businesses, and he's sarcastically, really not sarcastically commented that he wants to invest in a business that is so simple that it can be run by an idiot because someday it will be. Now, is Konami currently being run by idiots? Well, that's for you to decide. But the philosophy that Warren Buffett expresses there is very popular among, MBAs, right? People who study business for a living. The idea that, what a business should try to do is get loyal customers who are going to come for repeat purchases over and over, and then looking to reduce costs, maximize revenue, right? And then you do that over time, and you've got this sort of money printing machine that rewards shareholders in an exceptionally simple business. So here's why Konami doesn't like past formats, right? It makes their business more complicated. Shareholders don't want that, right? So in an ideal world, everyone would play advanced format. And it doesn't have to be advanced format. It's not that they're specifically hating on GOAT format. It's that their job is easier when they only have to design for one format, when they only have to hold events for one format, when their judges only have to know the rules of one format. And that is a big piece of what has happened here. So let me recap. Basically, a few years ago, past Yu-Gi-Oh formats got really popular online, right? People playing GOAT format, people playing Edison format. Those are the main two. Other formats as well. And Konami kind of said, hey, we want to capture some of that enthusiasm. We want to benefit from that. So they created what was called Time Wizard. Now, Time Wizard is the idea of, hey, it's like we are going back in time and playing a past format. So if you had Time Wizard GOAT format, that would be, hey, we're going to have all of the same rules and same card text of, summer of 2005, right? We are basically taking you back to how things were in Yu-Gi-Oh 20 years ago. Now, this is going to be a little confusing. That's Time Wizard, right? Time Wizard is same card pool, same card text, same rulings, same game mechanics, right? Same everything as a past format. Then, flash forward to a couple months ago, Konami says, no, you know what, we screwed up. Time Wizard is out. The new thing is time travel. So time travel is in some ways similar to Time Wizard. You're using the same card pool, right? So if you're playing time travel GOAT format, you are using the same card pool from GOAT format, right? So, Blackluster Soldier is legal, and, any card from 2006, let's say, isn't legal. Okay, pretty straightforward. However, the key difference is that in time travel format, you are using the same rules and same card texts from Yu-Gi-Oh! Today, right? That's 2025 as I'm making this. So that is, in effect, an inauthentic version of 2005 GOAT format. So, if you have a card that's been errated, let's say, what's like a good example of a card that's been errated? Sinister Serpent, right? Sinister Serpent doesn't have its broken 2005 text. It has its 2025 text that got a power level errata. And same thing with game mechanics like priority, right? So cards like Tribe Infecting Virus and Blackluster Soldier were better in 2005 because you could use their effects with priority before your opponent would have the opportunity to use something like Book of Moon or Bottomless Trapple. So again, difference between Time Wizard, Time Travel. Time Wizard is the full authentic version of the past format, right? Same cards, same card text, same game mechanics, etc. Time Travel is card pool from the past, right? In GOAT format, we're talking 2005 card pool. With Edison format, we're talking 2010 card pool. However, the card texts and all of the game mechanics are the same as today. And players didn't like that. So at first, Konami kind of backpedaled and we're like, okay, we've heard you, at Nationals, because we sort of just had Nationals. We are going to do Time Wizard, not Time Travel, right? Time Wizard is the authentic one. It's the one that the players like better. We're not going to do Time Travel. However, just recently, 24 hours ago, we found out that, yes, Konami caved to the outraged players for Nationals, but then the catch is, yeah, but in the future, though, it's going to be all Time Travel, no Time Wizard. So Time Wizard will no longer be a sanctioned, supported Konami format. So now let's get to the root cause of why they did this. Again, business executives, they like simple businesses. And when you say, hey, we're going to have this other format, and it's going to have completely different rules, and we're going to have to train judges on how to implement those rules, that is not something that anyone who really knows anything about business will like to hear. They're like, okay, you're basically taking your core product and you are making it more complicated and more diverse. Why would we ever do that? And that thinking, by the way, I know this is a bit of an aside, but this is why, by the way, in like the video game industry, we just see so much AAA slop now, where, Call of Duty just goes like, hey, we're just going to make like basically the same Call of Duty game every single year and just charge the same amount of money or more for it, right? Or, any other series like, I don't know, even like Assassin's Creed. I know that's like a little controversial, but like they just basically keep making the same Assassin's Creed game. Even outside of like video games, if you ask me, like if you look at phones, like when you buy the new iPhone, it's like 90% the same as the last year's iPhone, right? Because again, if your goal is to minimize costs and maximize revenue, and you have a very loyal fan base, you can basically just keep making the exact same product, don't overcomplicate things, and your customers will pay you for it. And in many cases, they'll just be happy about it. Like, oh, this new iPhone is like 2% faster than the last year's iPhone. Great, I'll buy it. Right? That's what a lot of people do. And in the video game industry, I think there's been a lot of pushback against that. Hey, you can't just keep making the same product and trying to charge us more for it. But, in general, and really I think with like card games in particular, whether it's like Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic the Gathering, whatever, the companies that run these games just know that like their player base is so, pot committed, so to speak, that they can basically do whatever they want and no one's going to leave, right? They're not going to lose any money. Like, I hate to say it, guys. There is never going to be a Konami shareholder meeting where someone goes and says, yeah, sorry, guys, our profits are down because the Edison format player base is boycotting it. Like, you can try to start a boycott. Go ahead. I'm not saying don't do it. Maybe just do it on principle, but don't expect that it is ever going to affect Konami's bottom line, because the vast majority of players don't care about any of this. So, part of the reason I think that, we've been seeing a lot of this backlash and a lot of the feedback coming from Edison format players rather than GOAT format players is, for whatever reason, they're two slightly different communities with slightly different views on things. GOAT format in general, and this annoys the fuck out of me sometimes, GOAT format is very pessimistic and very cynical. That's who their player base is. Now, a lot of times I hate that, but in this case, it's like, well, they're right. It's basically Goat Format has said, we don't trust Konami. We don't want anything to do with them. We're going to run our own events and basically pretend like Konami doesn't exist. And they were right for doing that. You can call them pessimistic and cynical, but they were right. Whereas Edison Format, I think that player base was a little more optimistic. They were like, oh, Konami is supporting us. We want to be friends with them. We want to build a relationship with Konami to grow our community. And it's like, I can't really blame them for that either, right? I mean, they were making a decision for the right reasons. But again, realize that Konami, all they care about is maximizing profit for shareholders. And unless the relationship you're building with Konami is, here's how our format is going to make you money, and not just more money, by the way, easy money, right? Because businesses don't like to be overcomplicated. They want to be like a factory, right? Boom, we print the new card, consumers buy it. We print the new card, consumers buy it. They want everything to be as easy as possible. And in my, multi-decade experience dealing with Konami, that was what I always saw. I just didn't really realize why until much later in my life. It was the same thing back in, I don't know, whatever it was, 2012, 2013, when a lot of like competitive players like myself were saying Yu-Gi-Oh should have a draft format, right? It's very skill intensive. And even if you like asked Patrick Hoban, he would say, oh yeah, like most of my YCS wins were just because like top 32 is draft and I was just better at everyone at draft. And obviously like really skilled players like him like that. I by the way, I absolutely love draft. I am a draft fanatic. But what Konami realized is, like taking this, making a new set and then designing it specifically for draft and then like trying to sort of push this new format on our player base and convincing them that they should like it, that's just too complicated for them, right? It's just the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So again, it's like, what I really think is that Konami is just operating their business the way that a business is traditionally supposed to be run. And as past format enjoyers, we have to realize that that's how it is, and we have to operate independently from Konami. And, we also have to realize that, if you're someone, whether you're like an online, creator or an online, I don't know, community figure, or you're someone that's like running Goat Format or Edison tournaments IRL, you have to realize this will not make you a lot of money, right? I'm sorry. Like if you try to go to some, really big box store IRL and say, hey, if you run Edison Format tournaments, you're going to make a lot of money, you're basically lying to them. So don't do that, right? I mean, make it about the community. Yeah, you're not going to have the support of Konami. In many cases, like you probably won't be having a ton of support from local stores either, unless there's like an advocate for the format who works at that store. But that's okay, right? I mean, you can have a grassroots community where everyone's having fun, everyone enjoys the competition, and no one's really making a ton of money. I know for whatever reason, like past Yu-Gi-Oh format players, they always like to compare our game to Super Smash Bros. Melee, but there are some genuine similarities in terms of our struggle and the reality of the situation, right? Like Melee is never going to make anyone a ton of money. Yes, I know like if you're Zane, you're making a decent amount of money by winning Melee tournaments, but like for the sort of system as a whole, whether you're running tournaments or commentating tournaments or making commentary or whatever, the system as a whole is not going to make a lot of money. You are doing it for the love of the game, not because it is a viable business, because it is not a viable business. Now, I also want to talk about like why past format players are so upset about this, because I think to some people, the whole like, well, why do we have to use like the old game mechanics? Why can't we just use the new ones? This might seem like a bit of a trivial dispute. And I think in a way that is like a pretty fair thing to say. So I've actually played, the time travel OCG version of GOAT format on Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. So just to clarify, that was like October 2004 card pool on Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel with, the OCG card pool and like the current rules, right? So no priority, cards like Sinister had been errated, whatever. And I actually enjoyed it a lot. And in a way, I thought like some of the things around like not having priority actually made cards like Blackluster Soldier more balanced, and therefore you could construe it as a good thing. So why are players upset about this? Now, as someone who is newly married, what I found is that like, a lot of the arguments that I have with my wife, and I don't mean to like make it sound like we're arguing every day, because we're not. But when we do have an argument, or even when I notice my parents having an argument, I notice that like a lot of the times the argument isn't about like the surface level issue. Like, I don't know, say you're having an argument about like where to go out to eat tonight. I wouldn't have that kind of argument, but some people do, right? So you're arguing with like your girlfriend or whatever about where you should go out to eat tonight. A lot of times that argument isn't about the actual issue of where we should go out to eat, but it might be that one person doesn't feel like they're being heard. So it might be that like maybe your girlfriend like doesn't care that much about where you go out to eat, but if she feels like you're the one that always gets your way, that you're the one always choosing where you go out to eat, she might choose to argue with you about it anyways, even though she doesn't care that much about the surface level issue, right? So people in relationships, they always want to feel like they're being heard, like their partner respects them. And that is what can start an argument, not like some sort of trivial issue. And the relationship between the Yu-Gi-Oh! Player base and Konami, I view that in much of the same lens. I actually don't think the time travel versus time wizard thing matters that much. However, what Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are pissed about, and rightfully so, is that Konami did not consult them, right? Konami has never said, unlike, for example, the Commander format in Magic the Gathering. Now, Wizards has made a ton of screw-ups with Commander. I'll be the first to admit that. But they at least try to interface with the community and have some sort of dialogue and balance the desires of the gaming community with, Wizards' need to make a profit. And, you could say that, again, like in recent times, maybe Wizards hasn't done a great job of listening to those players, but they're at least trying, or they're at least pretending. Konami doesn't even pretend. They don't consult any players, to my knowledge at least, on, hey, we're thinking of making this change. What do you think about this? What do you think the reaction is that the community is going to have? What can we do to make sure that our customers stay satisfied and know that what we're doing is right? I don't feel like Konami does that. I don't think most players feel that Konami does that. And that is why we see so much conflict between the Yu-Gi-Oh! Player base and Konami. A lot of times, it's arguments over very trivial issues. But when someone feels like they aren't being listened to, or when they feel like there is an unfair power dynamic in a relationship, there's going to be resentment and there's going to be backlash. So, what I think needs to happen is Konami needs to be better at communicating. They need to be better at sort of emotional management, so to speak. They need to be better at, giving off the impression that they give a shit about what their player base thinks, at least pretend to, right? I mean, in an ideal world, they should genuinely do it. But if they want less backlash, they need to at least pretend that they're doing it. And, again, it's like, and then if we're looking at like the past format players or whatever, I just think you need to accept that like, the cynics and the pessimists were right. And you can never really expect too much from a corporation especially when you don't really have boycotting power. Because frankly, you don't, right? Yu-Gi-Oh is a very strong, iconic brand. It's been around for more than 20 years now. And believe me, I've been here since the beginning. So every year I was always hearing, oh, they really screwed up this time. This is finally going to be the downfall of Yu-Gi-Oh. This is the end, guys. And it was never true, right? And if anything, I think over the years, Konami has become more emboldened to just do whatever the hell they want because they realize that they can basically get away with anything. And Wizards of the Coast, same thing too, by the way. It's ironic because, in my time, people were always saying wow, I wish Konami was more like Wizards. But over the years, what's actually happened is that Wizards has become more like Konami because they see all this stuff that Konami's getting away with. And they're like, hey, we can do that too. We can, we can throw the player base a bone every now and again, pretend to care. But at the end of the day, we can just, let's just focus on maximizing profit, right? Let's just try to squeeze every last dollar out of the player base. And it's frustrating, but at the end of the day, the difference between a company like Konami or Wizards and say a company like EA or Ubisoft or Activision Blizzard is that in the video game space, there's tons of competition, right? There's indie developers, there's Eastern developers. You got all of these alternatives, right? If EA is just putting out new slop every year, fine. Don't even get mad. Just buy something else. Whereas in the TCG space, there's a big network effect, right? People over the years, probably one of the most frequent kinds of new card games you see is someone who comes along and goes, hey, I remade Magic the Gathering, but I made it better, right? I made the mana system better. I made games last longer. I made the cards more balanced. I did this, I did that. And more balanced version of Magic the Gathering has always failed, right? That's what the spoils was. If you want to go down a rabbit hole, find out what the spoils was and why it was such a good game and why it still failed anyway, right? That seems like a contradiction to people. Why is it that good games fail and bad games succeed? Well, it's because, these bad games, quote unquote, like Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh, they have first mover advantage. They've had decades to build their brand, build those loyal consumers who are just going to buy whatever it is they're putting out. And when companies see that, they're going to go, great. If they're just going to buy whatever we make anyways, then let's put the minimum amount of effort in possible. And that is why Time Wizard format was doomed to fail.